Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Matt Storrs, and welcome to Mattsplaining. On today's episode, I have an expert on who I'm very excited to speak with. Expert, please introduce yourself and tell us what you're an expert in.
Hello, thanks so much for having me. This is Myq Kaplan. I am a stand up comedian and here today in my capacity as an expert in linguistics.
Absolutely fantastic. I think linguistics is something that more people should pay attention to. I think it's something that we overlook. It only really comes up when somebody is correcting your phrasing or your points of speech, limiting your ability to advance the language. People, the normal everyday people trying to change language, we don't like that. But if it's a Shakespeare or a Dr. Seuss or something like that, then it's okay, that's acceptable. If I go in and I start saying the one that people give me a hard time for is I say a snidbit, which is a mix between a snippet and a tidbit, and but it's a snidbit, and that I think makes a lot more sense than either of the other two words on their own because it's very specific. But for some reason, that does not catch on as much as you would think, and people give me a hard time. And it's also very hard too because over the course of time, outside of having people correcting you, these small little locations, you overhear something and you try to say it, and maybe you're mispronouncing it, and then you go decades without somebody correcting you. The sample of that of my dad actually played a prank on me. I just realized just a couple months ago that my dad had played the Irish and Scottish song, "You Take the High Road, I'll Take the Low Road" song.
Yes, I do know.
Yeah, so I'll be in Ireland before ye. He sang I'll be in Blarney before ye for my whole childhood. That's not a thing. That's not a version of the song or anything like that. So I've been going around my whole life singing that. And I have this whole internalized concept of this magical land of Blarney, similar to Narnia. Uh,
Sure. But here's a quick now this
yeah.
I don't know if this is a me thing, a you thing, or a both of us thing, or a neither of us thing. But my understanding of that song is like certainly it's absolutely not Blarney,
Right.
but in my memory, if you said to me, "You take the high, I take the high, you take the," and I'll get to, I would have said Scotland. Does
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
there a
So
version of that as well?
there is, yeah. So it's
Okay,
either Scotland or Ireland, depending upon the version that you're listening to and
got
who's
it.
recording it. Mine is way off base, so to speak, but I think I would argue that C.S. Lewis also got a mishearing of that song, maybe connected to my father, maybe connected to my great grandfather or something like that, and was like, oh, probably somebody corrected him, but he was like, "Oh, Blarney. Oh, maybe Narnia. That sounds fun." And
Ah.
then that's how we get that series of books.
You
And
know,
that's
I think that's possible, but I'd always heard that it was that somebody had just said to him once, "Hey, that's," he'd asked a question, he said, and they said that's Narnia business. And he was like,
ah,
"Oh, yeah, Narnia business. Of course, that's what we're going to
Nar
write about." Yeah.
exactly. And then Narnia business developed into this mythological land, and he moved it more away from focusing on these young children gaining skills for the workforce, a la Dickens,
Uh-huh.
and turned it into more of an allegory for Christianity. And I think that with a lot of linguistics is that this idea of always trying to focus on the differences, and or you're in basically two camps. You people that are looking for all the differences between languages and trying to keep things really regimented, and then there's the people that are trying to like let it flow into one another and develop and have, don't want to say that they want to have more fun with it because I don't know, having that flexibility with language and saying we have a multicultural society now where I know a little bit of Chinese, I know a little bit of Spanish, I know a little bit of Italian, and I know a little bit of French. All of that mixes together in such a way that I am indecipherable if I try to speak any of those languages. I speak French in a Spanish accent, which is, I've been told, is very embarrassing for me and that I should stop doing it. But because I do that, and it's a bad Spanish, it's the call and response tapes from when you're a little kid and learning. I just take that like deep, like baritone voice, hola, what have you. But yes, so Mike, based on what you've heard so far, about how much of that would you say was accurate?
Great question. I think I'm going to say it's really hard to say because, on one level, I'm tempted to say zero, but it's definitely not 100. You didn't get everything right, but you were in the ballpark
Mhm.
of it is the study of language, and you did talk about language a lot. So I'm going to give you a 50%.
50%? Fantastic.
Yes.
That is the sweet spot that I look for. Yeah, tell me about linguistics. What drew you to linguistics?
Sure, thank you. So here's a joke that I tell in my stand-up act sometime is actually something that I felt tied up in as you were speaking because, okay, so the truth is that linguistics, while it is the study of language, and there are people who sometimes, when they find out that I have studied linguistics, the same way that if you meet someone and find out that they're a psychologist, you might, at your most fearful, be like, I hope that you're not going to psychoanalyze everything that I say to you in this conversation that we're having at a party, which they probably weren't going to do, but now may, based on what you just said. But the same way that could happen when people find out that I have studied linguistics, they will sometimes say things like, oh, I hope that you do not nitpick and correct my grammar. And the joke and the truth of it is that linguistics is not about prescribing the way that people should speak, it is about describing the way that people do speak. And so when people say, please don't correct me in my grammar, I would say that's not what linguistics is about at all. And that's why you're dumb and bad and wrong. When, as you were getting things wrong about linguistics being about correcting people and getting things wrong, and I know that our pre discussion of this very episode, sorry to reveal to the world that you and I have spoken outside of this podcast about this podcast, not to get too meta about it, but the topic is language and we're speaking about it. So I think it's unavoidable and it's already happened. You said, feel free to correct me or tell me that I got something wrong. And I had the impulse to tell you, oh, yes, the thing that you have gotten wrong is the idea that people could get things wrong in the way that you were suggesting that they could, which they couldn't. But so there's this whole meta wrongness aspect to it. But to answer your question, how I got into it, I'd never heard of linguistics until I got to college. It's actually now unclear to me because I have a good friend who I met when he came to visit my college, and he said that he came with me to a linguistics class that I remember as my first linguistics class, which I thought would have been earlier in my college career than later, but he remembers visiting much later. So I don't know exactly when I learned the term and started studying it, but when I learned whenever that class was, it was called something like the structure of grammar or the grammar of English or the English of grammar, probably not that, the Duke of Earl, Robert the Bruce. And I feel like I thought about this before, real quick interlude. Do you know how the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, his regular human name identity is Bruce Banner, but at some point they determined that Bruce is his middle name and is actually Robert Bruce Banner. And I don't know if
Okay.
that's related to the historical figure Robert the Bruce. I think I do that it is not related, but I don't know. It's impossible to know.
Could be on some level. That might be a topic for a later episode.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I'll stay on track. When I started taking this linguistics class in at age 19 or 20, I remember the teacher on the first day saying that what we were going to be learning, about language was not what proper grammar is. She said specifically on the very first day, I don't care if you spell things wrong or if you split infinitives or end sentences with prepositions or say ain't, those things aren't quote unquote wrong. And then I learned about the prescriptive descriptive dichotomy, and it really opened my eyes and mind to that topic existing beyond language as well, just across culture and cross culturally. And it also lit up something that I had been aware of in myself since like at least age 7, I'd say, when I was really into that was when we learned to diagram sentences. And I remember loving that. Like I was always, if I had to choose, I feel like you don't have to, but I was more of a math person than a like essay writing literature person, let's say. And but I really felt I'm also my business, my art, my career is stand-up comedy, which is verbal, speaking words, not ones and zeros and numbers and such. But I felt like diagramming sentences really linked together. It was like the math of English. I was like, oh, finally, like making sense of a thing that I didn't realize could be made sense of because it seemed like it was just the water that we were all swimming in. Yeah, you talk, but oh, look, you can divide up. I know since then I've listened to Alan Watts talks a lot and or I've listened to Alan Watts talk a lot, depending. I think either of those works. And he has described the world as wiggly and that our human intentions are sometimes to try and create like square edges, corners, and lines. We make grids of New York City. We're like, oh, look at this straight, but where is perpendicularity or parallel lines in nature? Like
Right.
hardly anywhere, if at all. And that humans are always trying to create, boxes, squares out of things that have no such natural shape. And I think that Stephen Sondheim as well has said that art is something, this is paraphrasing, but he says something like art is a human attempt to create order out of chaos. Or perhaps, if not to create it, to curate order. I think that we humans are order curating machines or organisms, or like even to call myself a machine. I'm like, that's doing the thing as well. So I think that, I mean, I also in my undergrad life, I got a linguistics minor and then I went on to get a master's degree in it. I also studied philosophy and psychology. And so like all along the way, I've been interested in thinking and feeling and talking. And I think that I'm pretty unique in this way. I don't know if any other human has ever thought about thoughts, feelings, or words. But so I hope that people even understand what I'm talking about. If you know those terms, you can look them up in what I call a dictionary.
Ooh.
But that's a little word that I have for a book of words. And yeah, so I feel like I don't know what specifically got me along. Like I feel like it's been these seeds have been inside me this whole time, and they were first watered with learning that sentences could be diagrammed, and then even further growth happened when I got to that linguistics class in college, and then there's just been more and more blooming and blooming ever since. You can keep going higher and deeper, the branches or roots of a tree. And yeah, I think that that's how I got into it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it feels, using the garden metaphor there, it feels like you had a very watered or irrigated soil, so to speak. You were swimming in the idea of language. And then this seed got planted and was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm gonna take root. And then you have this whole garden of like all these other seeds that you brought in and grew. So you have this, I don't know what your preference is in terms of your greenery, if you have a garden or anything like that, but or how it might look in your mind of what you've created. But I presume it would be somewhat tropical with maybe some fruits and some delicious things and some very nice shade, pleasant smelling flowers, that sort of thing.
I do like those things. Here's two quick offshoots while we're in this metaphorical playground. Have you ever heard of a garden path sentence?
No, I don't know that I have.
A garden path sentence, a nice combination of the very concepts we're referencing. Here's an example of a garden path sentence. This is a complete grammatical sentence. It is the old man, the boat. And it's a sentence that means the the people that are manning the boat are the elderly. The old man the boat. But it's called a garden path sentence because it, for most people who are English speakers, are led down the path. When you hear the old man, you think that old is an adjective and not the subject of the sentence. You think that it's describing man, but in this sentence, actually, man is the verb. And I think that it's uh, to go back to why I'm interested in this. I feel like it really gets at the great questions that so many people are interested in and have been for all of human existence of like why? Like why is this or what is this and why is this and how all of the questions are being asked here. And we stumbled into the story in the middle where when you learn how to speak as a child, not by being taught, you just learn because people are speaking around you and to you, and the language acquisition device in our brains for most people kicks in, and people learn how to speak without writing. There are people who can speak but don't know how to write. Writing has nothing to do necessarily with speaking because we have just evolved at this place where like speech and language exists and allows us to communicate and form connections and huge worldwide societies that currently exist. And so I feel like the it really just gives voice to the whole topic, which then can be further subdivided. And I don't know if this is important to get into, but the basic like sort of building blocks of linguistics. I got my master's degree in it. There were like I think four basic classes that pretty much everyone had to take before you might branch off into a specialty. And so like from the ground up, so to speak, the one of the first classes, one of the first topics is phonetics and phonology, which sort of discusses like phonetics is the sounds that are actually coming out of your mouth. Phonology is how those sounds are represented in your brain. And different languages use a different sets of sounds. For example, Hebrew has a ch and English doesn't have that sound. English has a th and French doesn't have that sound, which is why a French accent might be like this or that. There are certain Asian languages that do have an R and an L sound, but they're actually represented similar in the same phoneme in the brain. The same place in the brain will sometimes manifest as an R, and sometimes manifest as an L, depending where it is in the word with regard to stress syllables and such. And like Korean, as I understand it, has two different B's that we hear as the same B because we only have one B and they have multiple B's. So there's all this whole wide spectrum or nebula. The International Phonetic Alphabet exists in ways that you can look at and be like, oh, these are sounds like there's different vowels in German that we don't have by making your mouth into different shapes and having the outside and inside mismatch what we would if you're an American English speaker standardly think of as the way to put your mouth for a vowel. So that's just the sounds, right? The sounds as they exist outside of our face and inside of our head. And then those sounds combine into meaningful units called morphemes. And so the next class is morphology, which is the study of the smallest meaningful units of sounds. Kind of if phones and phonemes are the atoms, then these are the molecules. And you're like, what can you do with hydrogen? It can team up with oxygen and make water. And so like water is a morpheme because the letters w, ah, the sounds w, ah, t, and like those don't have meaning by themselves, but together they have meaning. Or dog is a morpheme. House is a morpheme. Doghouse is a word made of those two morphemes. Cran and berry are morphemes, and they get combined into the word cranberry if you want. And then beyond that, they get the next class level up is syntax, where words or morphemes get combined into longer meaningful units, where whole phrases, whole clauses. And then on top of that would be semantics, which is the study of kind of meaning, where even if you could have the same set of words, the same sentence, but yeah could mean one thing with one tone and another thing with another tone. And so and I feel like at each level, like this is something that when I learned about all of this, it was concurrent as I was getting my graduate degree with my starting comedy. And I could note that at every sort of level, there can be fun misunderstandings that often I feel like many jokes can be says like, where does this joke exist? If it's maybe wordplay, that could be at the phonetic level. If it's a misdirection, it could be at the syntactic level. If it's about some deeper life meaning, it could be at the semantic level. And I was like, oh, this is, people have asked me sometimes, oh, so did you get into linguistics to further improve the way that you do your comedy, or did you get into comedy because of your interest in linguistics? And I think that these are both like a double helix of growing branches from the same initial acorn or seed that was planted.
Absolutely, Mike. This has been so insightful and so interesting. I can't thank you enough. If people wanted to learn more about you or more about this topic, where would you recommend that they go?
Thank you for having me and thank you for asking. So, Myq Kaplan is my name and it's spelled Myq Kaplan. So, if you put that spelling of Myq Kaplan anywhere that you think you might like to find at Myq Kaplan on social media, or I have a Substack newsletter, myqkaplan.substack.com. MyqKaplan.com exists as well, or you can find out about my live shows at my website or at punchup.live/Myq Kaplan. I have a book of my jokes illustrated by my friend Ramin Nazer called Heart Brain Art Train, available at my and Ramin's website. So pretty much any, and then I guess obviously come see me do comedy live if I'm where you are, or I have a bunch of albums and specials on all of the various streaming platforms, your Spotify's, your Apple Music's, your Pandora's, your Amazon's and such, your robotic overlord of choice. And then so I have a special on Amazon and a special on Dry Bar. I'll have a new special coming out later this year. So yeah, if you're interested, just look for Myq Kaplan where you wish to find me, and I will hopefully be there. And if you want to learn more about linguistics, I recommend get a master's degree at Boston University, though some of the teachers that I took classes with probably have retired or will be doing that. Or email me if you have questions. And if I have the answers, I'll let you know. And otherwise, I'm still in touch with some of my old professors and will happily get the answers that you want from them. You can also, here's the only thing that I'm not entirely an expert on is how you can become an expert in linguistics. I'm sure you use your computer, use some combination of your brain and computer, and Google linguistics or use your search company of choice. And yeah, I guess the shortest answer to how to learn more about linguistics is I don't know.
Thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Same to you, Matt.
Wonderful. My name is Matt Storrs, and this has been Mattsplaining.